Permafrost thaw is a critical, immediate, and long-term issue facing northern communities, Canada, and the planet. Canada at the moment is not well organized to effectively address permafrost thaw. And the 2017 Permafrost workshop recognized the need for networking the community openly and inclusively, and also the need for new capabilities and services. Canada's permafrost community would benefit from a national vision and strategy. And in this, it's clear that Northerners and Indigenous peoples have key perspectives, knowledge, and needs. There are other important perspectives and knowledge that exist in all levels of government that could be Indigenous, municipal, territorial, provincial, federal, the private sector, and in other organizations. And in this very large and quickly evolving space, leadership and activities are provided by several different organizations. And among them is NSERC PermafrostNet and also the Canadian Permafrost Association. And another important linkage here, as we've just heard in the policy panel, is the initiative now led by the Cascade Institute focused on permafrost carbon feedback and possible interventions. And this current shared meeting of NSERC PermafrostNet and the Canadian Permafrost Association is really a platform for advancing toward a vision and a strategy together, openly and inclusively. Before I hand over the word now to Janet, I'm not sure, Janet, if you've been fully introduced.
Possibly not, Stefan.
So Dr. Janet King is the chair of the board of directors for NSERC PermafrostNet. And I'm very happy to hand over to you, Janet.
Thank you, Stefan, and hello to everybody on this Zoom call. It's been a terrific afternoon, and I really hope this next phase is as engaging. I'm speaking for just a few moments now, adding to what Stefan has said, to provide with you the perspective of the board of directors for Permafrost, for NSERC PermafrostNet. So I don't need to tell this group that PermafrostNet is at its essence a strategic partnership network organized around the common goal of boosting Canada's ability to adapt to permafrost thaw. It's part of what this day or two is about. One of the approved outcomes of the network is next practice and sustainability of outcomes beyond the currently funded network. And of course, vision and strategy are important for that. In that context, the NSERC Permafrost board held a focused discussion on the merits of a visioning and strategy exercise for the future of permafrost research in Canada and the board's role in such an exercise. It was a great discussion, lots of opinions. We agreed at the end of the discussion that the board should and could take on the role of a catalyst or facilitator for launching the initiative, and agreed that network resources, that is, its very precious time from all its volunteers, and some admin resources could be used to support this. So we achieved that discussion, I think it was late July, and the first steps were to begin to reach out to interested stakeholders, partners, any interested parties for their perspectives and advice. And these conversations have been ongoing. And you'll hear time and time again, I think this afternoon, if you're interested in being contacted or contributing, and this afternoon's session is a part of that, do let us know. Part of the decision was to establish a committee to advance the initiative, to put some brain power behind it, if you will, a strategy committee. So we've been working to strike the initial membership of the committee, and it will hold its first meeting shortly. I think it's next week. And I'll give you the names of those on this committee for the initial committee structure. Of course, there's Stefan, one of the thought leaders involved, Jocelyn Haley from the University of Calgary, Kumari, who needs no introduction given her participation in this session over the last couple of days, and incoming president, or I guess she's president now, of the Canadian Permafrost Association, if I have my timing right. Sean Marshall, Departmental Science Advisor for Environment and Climate Change Canada, David Moore from the Department of Infrastructure and the GNWT, and a pending member from the Inuvialuit. We're still working to conclude that. So my use of the word initial was deliberate. We know that such an initiative will be undoubtedly a dynamic process with dynamic engagement, learning as it goes, and responsive to ideas, needs, and priorities of all those involved in permafrost-related research in Canada. And again, as I said, today's session is really part of that and meant to inform how do we advance this thinking going forward. And a key principle, always to be as open and inclusive as possible of all interested parties. So back to you, Stefan. That's the summary of PermafrostNet board's interest in this and leadership.
Thank you, Janet. And before handing this back over to Michelle, this session will essentially ask you to finish a sentence. Permafrost research in Canada could evolve so that, then we'll have some breakout rooms further elaborating this. But I want to give you a few examples of how such a sentence could be finished. For example, permafrost research in Canada could evolve so that it aligns with related initiatives across the country. For example, we have, Canada's evolving national adaptation strategy. There is the Inuit National Strategy on Climate Change. There's a Yukon strategy for climate change and others. It could, evolve so that the concerns of the following groups are addressed. It could evolve so that Canada, in its role as an Arctic nation, can demonstrate global leadership in climate change mitigation and adaptation from an Arctic perspective by. It could evolve so that next practice in ... is supported. It could evolve so that it helps address the following research questions that need broad coordination and long-term thinking. The sentence could say, it could evolve so that it is based on the principles of equity, diversity, and inclusion, and that it supports reconciliation with Indigenous peoples. It could evolve so that it creates new economic opportunities for Northerners. It could evolve so that reliable permafrost climate services are available to Canadians and to decision makers, or that a Canadian Permafrost Center is created, and so on and so on. So we really want you to think about, where do we want to go with an evolving Canadian permafrost research space? And this session is to hear from you about this.
Thank you, Stefan and Janet, for setting the scene. That is great. And I hope everyone is ready to start participating. Stefan mentioned that we're going to answer a question, and it's slightly edited to say, to be honest, I want permafrost research in Canada to evolve so that. And it is the general research in Canada, but think about it from your perspective. What do you want to see? We really want you to engage in this question. It is going. So we can see some people have started rating. There's some 34 participants right now. That means that 20 people are not participating there in this room. So I really encourage you to check out the link in the chat, add your 2 cents. And if you don't have a thought, you can rate other people's thoughts. It's equally as important. If anybody's having trouble getting in, feel free to unmute and let me know. So we currently have 41 participants that are sharing. There's 25 thoughts. And we just have over a minute left. So I would encourage you to start starring. If you haven't started already, there's 28 thoughts. You should be able to start every single thought. And we will really see the power of the group if we have ratings from everyone. So go, if you're sharing thoughts, transfer over to ratings, and let's use our last minute to rate as many thoughts as possible. So I can see the star ratings are going up. That's great. We have just over 20 seconds. Keep rating. I think we're going to go until we get to over 500 ratings. We're really close. That's great. So the buzzer just went on my timer. We have over 500. We have 541 ratings and people are still rating. And we have 33 thoughts to choose from. I'm going to share my screen that shows the top thoughts in order and let you know what we're going to do next. So how are we going to figure out what the breakout rooms are? We have, more than 30 thoughts. At this moment, I'm going to have Janet and Stefan do some background work with Tristan to look through the top thoughts and summarize what potential topics there are that we can then explore in detail for the rest of the session. And while they're doing that, I'd also like to use this time with our group to better understand what are we talking about when we're talking about these topics. So for example, clearly at the top, we have Northern and Indigenous communities are more involved. It got 4.2 stars, it's highest ranked. Whether you put that thought in yourself or you put it as a top, you start it as one of your top thoughts. What do we mean by this? What are we talking about? What is going to be talked about in that room? Can somebody unmute and share with us a little bit about why this is on top? People are still starring, so things have changed.
Yeah, Michelle, I can chat a little bit about the first one. I think this is important. It really was like hammered home for me during the keynote on the first day, on yesterday, where, people in Northern communities want to be involved from like the beginning to the end and not just like as kind of an afterthought or like, hey, can we do research on your land? But like being involved in the planning process of why we're doing research and answering questions that are valuable, not just to us as researchers, but to communities, and finding solutions that are like practical and oriented towards making people's lives better. So that's what I had in mind when I wrote that.
Okay, thanks, Teddy. Your thought came top thought. Awesome. We also heard about it in the policy panel, which is great. The second thought, the one that landed second is Canada can be a global leader on permafrost related challenges, and Canada should show global leadership. So whether you wrote it or whether you think this is important, why is it the second ranked thought? Can somebody unmute and just help us understand what is going to be talked about in this group? Why is this topic important?
Michelle, this is Tony. I put the other one, so Canada becomes the world leader it should be. So that's pretty much the same thought anyway. That's about number 5 down there. we have, apart from Russia, we're the next biggest country in terms of permafrost area. And yet the investment that's taking place in research in Canada is relatively limited compared to the amount of research dollars or euros that are going to other parts of the world. We clearly have, we are going to experience, along with the US and Alaska, so Alaska and Russia, we're going to have the greatest impacts of permafrost, and it's affecting our population. At the same time, we can see that internationally there are the Germans. I'm absolutely certain that if we dug a little bit deeper, we would find out the European community, and particularly Germany, is investing more in permafrost research than we are in Canada. So I think that we have the greatest need, and we should be a world leader. It's not like we don't have the smartest people. I'm sure we do. What we need is the means to get there. So I think that we have needs and challenges, and we should be, frankly, #1 in global research on permafrost.
Thanks, Tony. Thanks for adding some more information to that one. And yeah, we can see that it is now the second and the third on the list. And it followed by all Canadians understand the consequences of permafrost thaw and how it may affect them. So this is really beyond the policy discussion to really the entire public understanding. Danielle, is that something you want to speak to?
That was mine. I just think, well, I'm biased, but I think permafrost is really cool. And it is such an important part of Canada, like geographically, and the consequences. I know we all learn about this stuff, but I guess it'd be nice if more people knew about it and knew how grave the situation is. And I know it's difficult because in BC, there's other things that are happening too. It's just really tough. But if we could communicate how even people in the South and on permafrost, not within permafrost regions, how they may be affected in the future. I just want it to become more common thing, like a household name of permafrost.
We converged on a number of topics from what was shown here in the thought exchange.
One of the top thoughts here is better coordination between all the players in government, academics, practitioners, northern communities, and Indigenous groups. We can imagine what that means, but if you shared that thought, Tony, was that another one of yours?
That was my thought too, yes.
So it did come up here quite close to the top. So maybe you can just give a little bit of an explanation of what does that mean in reality?
We're such a spatially distributed nation. And yet there's the permafrost is, while there are regional differences, it's basically behaving in the same way across Canada. And so there are so many players in the game, and that includes at all levels. I was struck in the policy meeting that there's no one government department that is responsible for permafrost. Instead, it falls into Environment and Climate Change Canada, NRCan, Transport Canada, and probably I've forgotten some of the others. And then we have the northern parts of the provinces, and then we have the territories, and then we have the individual institutions. So for example, how do we respond to something like the Global Terrestrial Network on Permafrost? It's a global network that wants to have a Canadian representative on it that will feed through Canadian data. But all that data is not held by Canada. It's held by individuals and departments and distributed across this vast land. How could we get better coordination at the government level and then all the way down to the community level?
Great, thank you for that explanation. And thanks for everyone for participating and generating these topics. There's lots here. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. However, I do commit to sending this out to everyone afterwards. It'll be a part of the general reporting and harvest, but then you can have a look at what's on everyone's mind in general. What's going to happen now is first we are going to drop a link in the chat to a shared document. It's a shared Google PowerPoint. So hopefully people's computers and institutions allow these shared document and links. State who's in the breakout room, the topic you're working on, why it's important, and what advice do you have for that future committee, the committee that Janet spoke to in her opening remarks. You can choose the topic. We're having discussions about topics of importance that we think are important for a future strategy in Canada on permafrost. You'll see all the names of the rooms. There's one on coordination, economic opportunities for Northerners, Canada as a leader, understanding community needs, driven by Northerners, focus on adaptation. Coordination was more about coordination between all the different actors. Canada as a leader, taking a role as an Arctic nation, and discuss with your colleagues about why these topics are important, what kind of advice you want to give to the board, and try to ensure that everybody has a say. We will meet back for a next steps report back from Stefan and Janet.
What we found here, what's in these slides, this is of course not to keep everyone busy, but it's just one of the ways to, solicit thoughts, input, ideas of people. And the findings of this will be condensed into a little report. It'll be made available to participants. It's also going to be made available to the board of NSERC PermafrostNet, but also to other partners seeking input and guidance on, advancing an open and inclusive strategic thinking exercise. And if you have any other comments, or if you would like to participate in the effort in driving this forward, we appreciate hearing from you. Please contact us either directly, Janet or I, or just at permafrostnet@carleton.ca. Janet, do you have anything from your side to close this off?
Just a couple of comments, Stefan, thanks, and thanks to everyone who participated in that exercise. Some really interesting ideas and a sense of what's really important to people. And to echo what Stefan says, this will be feeding into, as I said earlier, ongoing thinking. It will be going to the consideration of the strategy committee. We'll be making sure the board is aware of people's thoughts. There are some interesting new perspectives here that I think will keep people working for a while yet as well. So thank everyone for your time. I'm sure we'll be engaging again soon enough.